We've got a lot to discuss on this episode of Legal AF. Donald Trump flailing after a district court judge, the Second Circuit Court of Appeal, once again rejected whatever the heck he's even trying to do in the E. Jean Carroll case, where he was previously found civilly liable for sexual assault, where he previously appealed and sought stays multiple times. The Supreme Court denied his petition to even hear the case at the Supreme Court level, to which Donald Trump refused to accept that as a no. And he continued to say, well, can you give me a do-over? I want a mulligan, Supreme Court. That doesn't exist. Then he tried to use the mulligan to further delay having to pay E. Jean Carroll, and says, hey, District Court, hey, Second Circuit Court of Appeals, I'm doing a mulligan with the Supreme Court. Yes, they rejected me, but I'm asking them. I need a favor out of you, Supreme Court. To which the District Court and the Second Circuit says, that's not what happens in our court system in the United States of America, Donald. Anyway, we'll cover what went down there. We should also talk about Trump's Department of Justice in a despicable fashion, as always, covering up more about Donald Trump's dark past, more about the Epstein files, as we've been reporting on Legal AF on the Midas Touch Network as well. The New Mexico State Attorney General has launched an investigation into the Zorro Ranch, which was Epstein's property in New Mexico, which the Department of Justice previously covered up and stopped all investigations into that location, which is perhaps where most of the sexual assault and abuse and perhaps even other things were going down there in New Mexico. And the New Mexico AG, as directed as well by the state legislature, has been doing an investigation. And so they need the cooperation of Trump's DOJ to get certain types of documents to do a thorough investigation. Trump's DOJ refusing to do anything. And they kind of lead the New Mexico Attorney General along, string them along. We'll get back to you. We'll get back to you. We'll get back to you. Oh, yeah, let's do another call in a month. And then finally, this past week, the AG of New Mexico is like, enough is enough, and went public with what's been going on behind the scenes. We'll talk about that. Also, what's been going on in front of the scenes. Trump's FBI director, Kash Patel, like everybody in this despicable regime, is out there flaunting taking our taxpayer dollars to fly around in private jets and to ride around in luxury vehicles and to treat our taxpayer dollars, which with respect to the FBI should go to protecting people and doing the work of the FBI and keeping the homeland actually secure and not killing people here and not harming people. But no, that's not how Kash Patel sees it. So Kash Patel was heading to see his girlfriend perform in a parking lot in Chicago because she ain't all that good of a singer. She's like performing at some parking lot there. And so he was flying out, and apparently he was summoned back as Donald Trump's been ranting and raving in the White House, kind of barricading himself there, that Iran's going to kill him and he thinks everybody's going to kill him. And he's put out instructions that if he gets killed by Iran, he's got 1,000 missiles locked and loaded and he will blow up the entire civilization of Iran. And he's like, my FBI director, you can't be listening to your girlfriend sing in the parking lot. Iran's trying to kill me. Iran's trying to kill me. And then there's, other reporting as well in Kash Patel that we'll get into. Should also be noted that Donald Trump not only kind of pardoning Proud Boys or commuting the sentence of the Proud Boys, his DOJ sought to dismiss all charges to basically expunge the record of the Proud Boys convicted of seditious conspiracy and the most serious January 6th insurrection charges. They demanded that a federal judge agree not just to, the pardon, which is automatic, but also to say, look, we're exercising our discretion in the executive branch. These Proud Boys are still appealing their conviction to the United States Supreme Court. We think that it is that we should not have processed that Biden's DOJ shouldn't prosecute him, dismissed him. And the federal judge said, I don't have discretion. If they say dismiss it, I am forced to dismiss it, at least what this federal judge said. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about a lot of other things as well. Let's bring in Michael Popok from Legal AF. Popok, good to see you. And we're going to talk about all of those things. And at the top of the show, we should talk about what's going on with the reporting about Trump not flying on the Qatari jet and needing the old Air Force One leaving Turkey, given its proximity to Iran. And as we've always been saying, the Qatari jet's not equipped to properly defend. And then kind of like what Trump did with the reflecting pool, where he scapegoated David Hearn and said that, oh, the vandals are ripping it up, two-time Olympic canoeist. Let's prosecute people, because we all said there would be algae because the source is the Potomac Basin and it's basic science, and it was a shoddy job that was done by Donald Trump's contractor. He prosecutes people. Now he's going after the reporters and issuing subpoenas, FBI agents knocking on people's doors, Popok, at their home, issuing criminal subpoenas. Let's talk about it all, man.
I'm not a hydrologist, but I know if you paint or line a long, several football field length reflecting pool and change the color of it from dark gray, which was done on purpose, to some last minute cut corner, no bid pool liner, truck liner company, American Blue, and add the beating down of the anybody been to DC in the summer? DC is a sweltering, it's like a warm, it's like a hot blanket that just envelops you for the entire summer. Beating down on that, you're going to make algae. Okay. They've now drained the pool bed 3 times, including in the last 24 hours, and it's still coming up green, right? I thought Donald Trump was supposed to drain the swamp, not create one, but it's all about his cost cutting, right? It's all about his cutting corners. All these no bid contract to redo the Kennedy Center. Well, a buddy wants to pray with him and give him money. Oh, you get an $8 million contract. He's like Oprah, and you get an $8 million contract. All no bid, which means there's no proper analysis. There's no proper consultation with experts, multiple experts who know what they're doing. And then you have the same thing going on with the Qatari Air Force One plane. When you and I first reported on this, the 14-year-old Boeing plane being gifted to Donald Trump, the Department of Defense, it's only a rental, by the way, because Trump thinks he's going to fly it and shove it into the Miami library of his. Of course, the House the House Democrats, maybe Republicans and senators have something to say about that as terms of a gift. Because just to remind everybody, there are 2 Air Force Ones being built right now to be delivered by McDonnell Douglas, combination Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, for a $5 billion contract. They're not done yet. Okay. Trump should have just been normal and not insane, and just used the old Air Force One that it's apparently safer than this new thing for that durational period for another 1.5 years. No, he needed to have gold toilet bowls and leather seats and rich Corinthian, who knows what. The problem is, when you and I said it would take over a year to retrofit that, to make it missile proof, to make it a flying situation room or command and control structure, we know of what we were speaking, because experts were saying to take that Qatari plane and to make it a flying White House with a president inside is going to take $1 billion and over a year of time. Came in at under $1 billion in like 6 or 8 months. We're like, how did they do that? Well, now we know how they did it. They left out all command and control structures, so it can't be a situation room. It's like having a Ferrari, if you're lucky enough to have a Ferrari in your driveway, but it has no engine. You just have to look at it or sit in it. So he's off bragging about it. But when the credible threats to take out Donald Trump by the Iranians reached the level of not our intelligence community, because Donald Trump doesn't trust it, but the Israeli intelligence community said they're going to bomb you. They're going to kill you. Do you see the signs? By the way, very, very clear handwriting with the Iranians during their funeral celebrations. Trump, we are going to kill you. It's clear as day. They're not, they're not, you don't have to guess what they're thinking. And so that freaked out, apparently, the security forces and Secret Service and those around Donald Trump. And they said, you can't take the flying golden airplane. You got to go back to the old Air Force One, because we've got laser beams that can blind missiles, and you can run the situation room from there. So Trump lied in a presser, and he said, "Oh, the plane's flying to UK so that the troops can see it, like it's some sort of USO show with Bob Hope. Oh, let's come see the new plane." And 2 major organizations reported on it besides Midas Touch and Legal AF. One was MS Now, and the other was the New York Times. with Julian Barn and Eric Schmidt and a bunch of other people. And they said sources, because that's what reporters do, report that they effectively grounded Donald Trump from using the Qatari Air Force One to get him on a safe one that didn't have those defects to fly from Ankara, Turkey to the UK at the end of NATO, and then hopefully, I believe, home. So Trump didn't like it. So they're going after the New York Times. I don't know about MS Now at the moment. And they're saying, we want to get to the bottom of who are your confidential sources. Remember, the day that the MS Now published it first, Stephen Chung, the press secretary, the communications director, you always know when he's lying because his lips move when he talks. He said, she's a liar. The reporter should know what she's talking about. She's not a journalist. Well, if she's not a journalist and it's not true, then why are they going after the sources that supported the story? That the story's not true, then why? I don't understand. But in any event, they issued subpoenas through their favorite prosecutor's, second favorite prosecutor's office, the one in New York, the Southern District of New York, while Jay Clayton's still hanging around as the prosecutor. And the New York Times, of course, is going to do what the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and the New York Times have done before them, move immediately to quash those subpoenas. I think they're going to be super successful with a district court judge in New York, in the Southern District of New York. And then, but I want to point out one thing to you, Ben, and to our audience. The Situation Room was somehow breached by firsthand witnesses who cooperated with two other reporters of the New York Times, Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, as part of an article, as part of a book, the article, The Freak Out in the Situation Room. It was just 2 weeks ago. And The Freak Out in the Situation Room had detailed quotations, quotes, like a transcript, like a recording of Todd Blanche and Susie Wiles and J.D. Vance and others, okay? The difference is they have not gone after Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan because they put up a warning label on their article. They said, we have 1,000 cooperating sources inside and outside the government, and we have recordings. So that asymmetrical information, in other words, Trump doesn't know what Maggie has on him or Jonathan. So they have, even though it was an entire front page, splashy article, Situation Room, freak out, we have recordings. No attempt to indict or prosecute Maggie Haberman, nor should there be, or to try to subpoena her or search warrant her house. Very, very smartly played by Maggie and Jonathan Swan to put up a warning label that said, you coming after me? There's more where that came from.
One of the things also, and I'm going to toss it over to you to give us the update on E. Jean Carroll, that's just worth reflecting on, as I was hearing you say that as well. 1,000 sources, Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan, as you mentioned, Midas Touch reported right away what the situation was, but before the New York Times report and Washington Post, Midas Touch reported on it, and we didn't have sources on that. And it just made me reflect, Popok, that we're also in a moment where I think we need, obviously, very well-sourced journalism and reporting, and all of that still plays an important role. But also, there's so many things that are happening right in plain view, right before our eyes. And there are lots of people who are very hesitant just to describe what is happening. I mean, we saw Donald Trump at the NATO summit. We heard the things that he said. It's not just a breach of protocol and everything. I mean, in addition to just, calling Iran the Islamic Republic of Japan and calling the JCPO the JCOP or whatever he was saying, in addition to calling Zelensky Putin and then saying, ask me questions, I'll pretend to be Putin. I mean, there's all of the stuff that obviously demonstrates cognitive and physical decline. But just think about him spewing out things that used to actually be state secrets and things that were guarded, where you would need to rely on lots of heavily sourced reporting to say, to identify the corruption, the criminality, the national security breaches. Popok, he's out there every day just saying it. He does it. And so much, I think, of the smoke and mirrors is kind of a refusal to open up our eyes, not us here at the Midas, but the refusal more broadly to just call out what it is we're seeing, because sometimes it's so obvious and it's so conscious shocking that people veer into these areas. It's like, no. That's criminality. That's corruption. That's deranged. call it out. Anyway, I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's important to note that as well. Popok, talk to us about E. Jean Carroll. What's the latest there?
Absolutely. So proud of everything about E. Jean Carroll. Not letting being an Epstein survivor define her life, but making sure that Donald Trump pays what's approaching close to $100 million that he owes her and more for having sexually abused her in that department store dressing room in 1996. And that's not our commentary. That is a jury finding that 9-0 in New York, having heard all of the evidence. Two separate trials. The one we'll focus more on here is the one that went to trial first, which happened a little bit out of sequence, had to do with what Donald Trump not only did in that dressing room, proved, but what he said about her in defamatory way while he was no longer president in between his two presidencies. So after he was president the first time, and the punitive damages that went along with that. A jury came back. That was the trial that some people may remember. That was Joe Tacopina, a lawyer now lost to the trash bin of history, who represented Donald Trump before Todd Blanche and Emil Bovee and Alina Habba. And Trump did not. He famously or infamously refused to testify because he's a coward in that case. And the jury came back with a $5 million judgment with interest that has been running since 3 years ago almost. It's up to $5.8 million. Now, fortunately, in order to appeal, if you want to take any appeal and you don't want to pay your judgment, you got to post a bond. It's called a supersedious bond. He posted the bond in cash, Trump did, with the court clerk system. And that's been running. He's been upping the interest in it because he's been required to. So she's had security for ultimately getting paid once all of his appellate process, his appeals are exhausted. And Trump has taken several appeals. That's why it's taken over 2.5 years. Second Circuit Court of Appeals, he loses. Second Circuit Court of Appeals, I want the entire Second Circuit Court of Appeals, not just 3 judges. They reject it. He throws in and lobs a petition to the United States Supreme Court. Now, this is only about the only aspect of that I think is interesting of the appeal. It has nothing to do with immunity. Some people may be thinking, oh, it's about the immunity. It's not. It's about what categories of evidence about prior bad sexual misconduct Donald Trump committed in the past that were let into the trial by Judge Kaplan. And you're allowed to do that under the federal rules of evidence when you're dealing with a sex abuse, sexual misconduct type case. It is one of those exceptions to the general rule that prior bad acts don't come in, but they do come in when you're dealing with somebody who has sexually assaulted or abused somebody. So he let in, the judge, other testimony from 2 other women, a People magazine reporter who said who testified to the jury that she was sexually attacked by Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago when she was there doing a puff piece for People magazine about Trump's new marriage to somebody named Melania Trump. And as soon as Melania left the room, according to her testimony, she was attacked. And another woman, Jessica Leeds, who had the misfortune of being upgraded to first class on an airplane, first time she's had in her life, and sat next to somebody she found out was Donald Trump, who sexually molested her, assaulted her on that plane. He also let in the Access Hollywood tape of Donald Trump bragging with Billy Bush about being able to grab women by their genitalia and get away with it because he's a celebrity and just start kissing them. All that came in, along with lots of other evidence, including E. Jean Carroll's own testimony about what happened. And Trump says, no, none of that should have come in. Judge was wrong. Okay. Supreme Court, you and I reported on this 2 weeks ago. Supreme Court looked at his petition for writ of certiorari, filed by the law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, which is where Jay Clayton, who's now going to be the director of national intelligence, came from, where the new U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jamie McDonald, comes from. Anything involving E. Jean Carroll, Sullivan Cromwell has now been on the scene filing petitions and motions. 13 times the United States Supreme Court in conference considered that petition. 13 from February. And each time they couldn't get 4 votes. You need 4 to grant your appeal. You need 5 to win. So just 4 He controls 6 on the U.S. Supreme Court. 2 of them have their own sex abuse allegation problems. Kavanaugh and Thomas. Can't even get those guys. Every week, rejected, or not granted, I guess is the better way to put it. Until finally, they had 5 votes or more, I think more, to reject the petition outright. The reason I say more is no one dissented. You'd think at least Alito and Thomas or Kavanaugh would throw him a bone and say, I would have granted the petition, knowing that they were going to lose anyway. No skin off their apple. No dissent whatsoever. So the next day or hours later, Robbie Kaplan, the lawyer for E. Jean Carroll, files a motion for the judge to issue an order directly to the clerk of the court to give her the money, all the principal and all the interest that she's owed. This is all last week. Trump lobs in an hour later an opposition paper. And his main objection is he'll be irreparably harmed because she, including with me in an interview, said that she was going to give away the money, that she's 83 years old. She told me in my interview that that's not what defines me in life. Money does not drive me. It was never the reason I brought the lawsuit. And it's not what I'm going to do with the money. I've set up a foundation through a law firm in New York, and I'm going to fund it with the money as soon as I get it to help other women who have been similarly harmed as me. She said, I'd rather take a long walk with my dogs and a great plate of fettuccine than spend that money. And he cited, not my interview, but he said, she's going to give away the money. And if she gives away the money, how am I going to get it back? Yeah, it's time for it to be on her side of the ledger after waiting 2.5 years. And if he somehow miraculously, and he has zero chance of accomplishing this, getting the Supreme Court to reconsider something they just did a week ago without dissent, which has never, I've talked to Supreme Court historians, never happened before. Never in the history of the Supreme Court have they reversed their own decision because the president asked them to. So that's not going to happen. In the meantime, the order said as soon as he's done with his original petition for writ of certiorari having been rejected, she gets paid. Not that he gets to file ad infinitum, ad nauseum, more and more motions, to be heard. And if that happens, he somehow reverses it, then you get the money from her. But she's getting the money today. In fact, Judge Kaplan, in his order, he filed a memorandum of opinion with it. He said, equity now demands, after you've been stalling and she's been injured waiting, it's time for the money to be paid. And that was it. And as far as I know, and I've reached out to Robbie Kaplan, I believe she's been paid. I believe the money has already been released because Donald Trump tried to lob a last-minute emergency motion for stay to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which sits over Judge Kaplan. And there, that 3-judge panel for the Second Circuit was like, yeah, we're not. And one of them is a Trump-appointed judge. And they were like, yeah, we're not going to issue the stay. We don't see irreparable harm. If somehow you reverse it, we'll deal with it later, but we're going to, we're not going to block it. We're just not going to block it. There it is right there. Actually, I'm sorry, it's a 3-judge panel, but the clerk issued it. And so that one is the operative one. And he, as far as this reporting, he has not obtained or sought yet a stay, and the money's been paid out. So that then leaves us with the $90 million with interest that she's owed on the other case where he testified and did testify with Alina Habba there again. And I think Todd Blanche playing more of a role. And the jury came back with a much larger verdict about defamation when he was president and other punitive damages. This is the one where he stood up famously or infamously and walked out on Robbie Kaplan in a huff while she was doing closing argument, which is a really bad look in front of a jury, especially when you're there in a sex abuse case and there's allegations that you hate women. So that was a bad move to walk out again on that. So that judgment is still hanging around. It's been exhausted through all the appeals besides the Supreme Court. But Sullivan and Cromwell, that firm, has filed another petition for writ of cert. And that has an immunity aspect to it about whether Donald Trump had immunity, any kind of immunity, as an employee or otherwise, to defame E. Jean Carroll and say, she's not my type. I never would do it. I wouldn't sexually assault her because she's not good looking or she's old or whatever the F he said in the Rose Garden, whether that gives him some sort of immunity. Second Circuit has already ruled that Alina Habba waived immunity because she didn't raise it at any time during the trial until like almost the appeal. And so, we're going to have to see what what do you think on that one? What do you think the Supreme Court's going to do with the larger judgment, with this kind of immunity, but civil sex abuse case immunity?
They are not touching Trump personal cases. They're not. They're
I
not.
agree with you.
They're just, as horrible as I think the Supreme Court is, one of the things that they've shown is to be very also self-interested. They create exceptions where none exist, and they destroy precedent. I'm mostly talking about the right-wing Supreme Court justices. I mean, they'll create a precedent that says agencies aren't independent anymore. And then what does Donald Trump do? He goes and he destroys basically the Federal Elections Committee and just fires everybody. He goes, I can fire everybody. But then the Supreme Court says, you can do that and destroy the lives of Americans, on mostly every issue. Okay, but when it comes to the Federal Reserve, we're going to create the new Supreme Court exception because, we all got money in the stock market, Donald, and don't be all crazy over there. You want to be crazy when it comes to the environment. You want to be, obviously it's going to impact them too, but they don't see that. Future generations will die of cancer and things like that. We got to focus on our money right now. But when it comes to, energy and EPA and elections, you go have fun, go wild, Donald. Not when it comes to the Federal Reserve. So, I think in this context here, they don't want to personally touch a case involving sex assault and sex abuse and Donald Trump. They just want to stay away, but it's out of a personal protection of themselves versus actually, and anything else there. So that's my view. They ain't touching it. I think that, we'll talk about that story, I'm sure, in, several months or a year, where Trump will have to pay her the remaining, with interest, probably close to $100 million or more at this point. Let's take our first quick break of the show. I want to remind everybody that if you or anybody you know has been injured in an auto accident, car accident, trucking accident, negligence of a company, negligence of others, reach out to Michael Popok's law firm. Lots of Legal AF listeners and viewers are calling and represented by Popok, 877-POPOK-AF, or visit thepopokfirm.com. Call 877-POPOK-AF or visit thepopokfirm.com. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Legal AF YouTube channel, subscribe to the Legal AF Substack. And we've got a lot more show, though, so hang in there, stay in there. We got a lot to discuss when we come back after our first quick break.
One of the best investments I've made for my health has been getting better sleep, and my Lisa mattress has made a real difference. Look, at the end of a long day, it's the place where I can actually unwind. It's supportive without feeling stiff, comfortable without sinking, and I wake up feeling more rested and ready to tackle the day. Lisa has a lineup of beautifully crafted mattresses tailored to how you sleep. So whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or somewhere in between, there's an option for you. They're meticulously designed and assembled in the USA, and they back everything with free shipping, easy returns, and a 120-night sleep trial. Go to lisa.com for 30% off select mattresses, plus get an extra $50 off with promo code LEGALAF, exclusive for my listeners. That's LEESA.com, promo code LEGALAF for 30% off select mattresses and an extra $50 off. When you use our code, you're supporting our show. Lisa.com, promo code LEGALAF. You know that airport moment when you're balancing coffee in one hand, your phone's dying in the other, and TSA suddenly needs your laptop. That's why I've been obsessed with Noble. I've been using the Belmont leather carry-on, and it's one of those bags that actually makes travel easier. It has a flip-out cup holder, a built-in charging port, and a front laptop pocket, so you're not digging through your bag while everyone waits behind you. The 360-degree wheels glide effortlessly, and I love that it's zipperless. It locks shut with a latch system that can't be pried open. It looks sleek, minimalist, and totally first class, even when you're not flying first class. Plus, every suitcase comes with a 100-day money-back guarantee, free 3-day express shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Noble gives you real travel peace of mind, security, design, and convenience all in one. Upgrade to luggage that looks better, lasts longer, and travels smarter. Head to nobletravel.com for up to 46% off your entire order. That's NOBL travel.com for up to 46% off after you purchase. They'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them our show sent you.
Welcome back to Legal AF. Thank you to all of our sponsors for making this show possible. Support our sponsors. They support this show, Michael Popok. Let's get into talking about the Trump regime's continued cover-up of a child sex trafficking ring. Hard to believe that here we are, 2026, that's a sentence that has to be uttered repeatedly over and over and over again. But that's exactly what the Trump regime has been doing, based on the conduct we described about Donald Trump in the first segment, being found civilly liable in a sexual assault case, where there's lots of other victims who have come forward in that case alone. Not entirely shocking that despicable regime with despicable people would do despicable things, but here we are. And now last week I was talking about Midas Touch host, courageous Katie Phang, pushing forward with her lawsuit regarding the Epstein Transparency Act to get the files. The Trump regime is trying to say, oh, we don't have to show cause. We don't need to produce the records. We've already produced a privilege log or redaction log by writing a paragraph that they don't have to produce things. That's not what a privilege log or a redaction log is. You and I, Popok, have made such logs before. They are long. They could be thousands of pages. They could be tens of thousands of pages. Heck, they could be hundreds of thousands. You got to log every document that you're not producing and explain why on a document by document basis. I would have loved when I was an associate doing privilege logs if I could have said, you know what? A lot of privileges, Judge. A lot of privileges. Trust me, bro. I'm not going to produce them. That's not what you have to do. And that's not what the Epstein Transparency Act said they could do. You got to follow the law. So we talked about that last week, obstruction there. Then they said, oh, Katie Phang, go do FOIA. And then FOIA requests, people would say, the Trump regime would say, we can't do your FOIA. It's the Epstein Transparency Act. That's how you have to enforce it. But there's no cause of action for people, so nothing we can do here. We're just going to cover up millions of documents, and whatever. Good luck trying to find it. So that's where we are over there. Then separately, Popok, here, this is the New Mexico Attorney General, the New Mexico State Legislature, which has lots of Democrats. But it was bipartisan. Everybody voted for it. Open up an investigation into Epstein's property, Zorro Ranch, which he had, I think, since 1993. It was purchased under mysterious circumstances. By the way, the estate of Epstein sold it under mysterious circumstances to a Trump MAGA guy, another kind of trust fund family where the son now works for the Trump regime, and that MAGA family that bought the Zorro Ranch, we're going to turn it into a Christian retreat and start demolishing it. It's okay, lots of red flags there. Not sure that should be turned into a children's Christian retreat given what happened on that property. But in any event, New Mexico State Legislature, New Mexico AG, inspired by the Epstein Transparency Act and what was in the files, of course, launch an investigation. But Popok, it requires cooperation with the Department of Justice because the DOJ holds the master files, the lists, the certain locations. So there is work that the New Mexico AG can do truly independently, and they could do it, but there's always cooperation with the feds and things like this. And here that would be needed, especially given a lot of the documents that have not been turned over in the Epstein Transparency Act, which probably inform also why there was a massive cover-up in New Mexico, right? So the New Mexico AG previously sent this letter that was now made public, but the letter was sent we now learned about a week and a half ago or so, and they lay out, hey, look, and the New Mexico AG says, DOJ, February 13th, we reached out to you. Written correspondence, informal, you ignored us. March 13th, we had a go formal letter to Attorney General Bondi at that time. April 1, you were ignoring us. We did a telephone conference saying, what's going on here? May 3rd, 2026, we had to now issue like a formal TUI letter that was submitted. May 29th, 2026, written follow-up with Blanche and Associate Deputy AG Pastana. You said you'd get back to us. June 4th to 5th, meeting requests directed to your office and in person during Attorney General Torres's visit. That's the Attorney General for New Mexico. And basically what they say is that, you're stringing us along. You keep saying you want to help, you want to do it. Sure. Give us a month, give us a week, give us 2 weeks. We'll get back to you. But here we are. And so the New Mexico AG went public at the end of this week. And so Popok, this is this reminds me of, I'm not sure, yes, a more heinous version, but this is Trump's 2-week cycle that I call it, right? He tries to trap you in the 2-week delay. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks. I'll get back to you. Then he likes to run out the clock. And then he hopes that naturally you'll either stop chasing it or someone else, you'll get a new job, and Trump's, born with a golden spoon in his mouth or whatever. And he's just like, I could wait you out. I don't care. I don't care about anything, and I'll wait you out. And that's his plan. I just remember even, during his first campaign, when people had lots of questions about Melania's immigration status. And he said, I'm going to hold a press conference and I'll get into it. I'll explain how she got that Einstein. We'll get into it. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. And here you are, Popok. No one really, we talk about it on the Midas Touch Network, but no one really talks about it anymore. And that's the strategy here, but it involves covering up child sex trafficking that we also know they're covering up Trump's name in certain files as well. So Popok, what do you make of it all?
America is united against child sex trafficking and any connectivity between Donald Trump's administration and Epstein. I mean, that's the one thing that Donald Trump has done as the great unifier, is he's unified MAGA, alt-right, conspiracy theorists, dark web, progressives, democratic socialists, independents. We all find his continued lack of transparency, opaqueness, giving orders to his people around him, led by now Todd Blanche, to cover up the cover up, to be something we're not willing to swallow and won't forget. Donald Trump believes that this is a normal news cycle, as you said, the 2-week news cycle. It's not. And it's been frustrating him because he thought this would just go away by now. That was the reporting that came out of Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swann's Situation Room Freakout article, is that Trump doesn't want transparency. He wanted gestures to act like it was transparent about the Epstein files, but not true transparency. And that Todd Blanche has been leading the charge. I mean, you reported, and so as did I, we've had Katie on both shows, about Katie Fang's lawsuit. And, Todd Blanche has a lot of explaining to do. Next week, we're going to have the live stream on the confirmation hearing up on Legal AF YouTube. I'll be doing the pregame show for it. And one of the many scandals that are at the feet of Todd Blanche that he has to answer for is, why did he just tell Judge Sullivan, Katie Fang's judge, the judge in her case, to go pound sand, and he wasn't going to produce any more documents, and basically confess that they never created the redaction log that you talked about at all? Katie Fang's lawyer, Brendan Ballou, joined me for an interview. He said, he told our audience, I'm pretty sure they never did it. I'm pretty sure, despite statutory requirement in the Epstein Act, I'm pretty sure they never did it. And he basically confessed that he never did it. He says, well, we provided a partial sort of it was a list about redactions, but I wouldn't call it a redaction list or a log. You didn't produce a log of 200,000 pages of redacted thing. As to translate the foreign language documents, nah, too hard. Nah, we don't pass, as if he can pass on a federal judge's order and that'll be sufficient. And the other documents, and something you and I have been reporting on, which is, why is Leslie Groff, who gave some sort of testimony that you and I have picked apart, who was the 18-year executive assistant for Jeffrey Epstein, why was she listed as a co-conspirator in a draft indictment? And now the Epstein survivors are all coming out and saying she lied. She lied about not knowing how old the people that she hired to give him massages, which turned out to be sexual abuse. She knew the ages. She knew many of those girls went to high school. One thing about, and I used to live 15 blocks away from Jeffrey Epstein on the Upper East Side of New York. Tons of private girls' schools in those neighborhoods. It's up by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. People know the area. And, during school year, it's just mainly, there's some boys' schools too, but mainly girls' schools. And she was recruiting from there. She paid them. And now the girls, now women and survivors, are saying she lied, which would be normally cue the Department of Justice to start a prosecution, right? And an investigation. No, because this Department of Justice only does one thing: goes after and weaponizes the Department of Justice and or its Civil Rights Division to go against Donald Trump's political enemies or those he thinks have slighted him some way in the past. That's their full-time job, or as I've joked only half jokingly, they are Department of Justice is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump Organization. That's it. As is the Commerce Department, as is the Treasury Department. So you've got all the documents still being hidden away, much to the chagrin of the survivors. So New Mexico, the letter that you wrote, raised a couple of interesting issues. One, it reminds us that Maureen Comey, James Comey's daughter, was the head of the division that was prosecuting Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and that she was given, back in the 2018-2019 period, all of New Mexico's then files that they had already started accumulating about that ranch. And but there was no reciprocity, even though Comey was going to do it. Yet another reason why Maureen Comey was fired. One, so they could curry favor with Ghislaine Maxwell through Todd Blanche and not have Maureen Comey in the room, who knew the truth about the evidence, silence her by firing her, and also silence her potentially on the New Mexico investigation of the ranch. You and I don't know whether there are survivors' bodies buried on the ranch, but that's the point. Neither does the Department of Justice, nor the FBI, nor New Mexico's Department of Justice. And that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of, whether there was torture, sex going on there, and people buried there at that ranch. And we still, to this moment, don't know the answer to that. So kudos to the New Mexico Department of Justice and its Attorney General for also saying, we've got a case, but our case is being eroded by your failure to provide and do lip service for all those categories of things that we've asked for. And the thing that didn't get enough attention, except on Midas and on Legal AF, was James Comey, which is now reflected back in this letter, admitting that in 2019, when the Justice Department was run by Donald Trump and his Attorney General Bill Barr, they put the kibosh and quashed the investigation by New Mexico in 2019 into the ranch. Why? It wasn't like they were doing their own investigation, and so they didn't want New Mexico to go first. They just wanted to end the investigation. And Comey says it on Jesse Waters, and it's repeated here about, if anybody thought that wasn't true, it says here, on page 2 of the letter, the New Mexico Department of Justice's investigation was effectively suspended by federal request in 2019. Its file released to federal authorities, that would be Comey, and its survivors left without an accounting of what occurred in New Mexico. The U.S. DOJ now holds in its possession the very records that would allow the New Mexico Department of Justice to resume what federal intervention interrupted. I mean, there are so many things that Todd Blanche is going to have to answer for. Many of them are connected to the Epstein scandal. The Situation Room comments, the Ghislaine Maxwell being benefited by being sent to a low security prison where she has a dog, apparently, and has access to books and doesn't sit in a jail cell after she gave testimony that Donald Trump obviously thought was helpful. We're not even talking about the Jan 6 weaponization fund. We're just talking about Epstein and his refusal to acknowledge that within the 3 million documents produced, and maybe the 3 million that haven't been produced, there is actionable intelligence to investigate and or prosecute the predators of the 1,400 or 1,500 survivors. He refused that alone. Any one of these things that you and I have talked about Todd Blanche, would be a disqualifier in any other universe. And the question for our audience, and you and I are going to follow closely next week, is whether this is almost an equally divided Senate Judiciary Committee. There's 13 Republicans and 12 Democrats, 25. You need majority. You need all 13. If a guy like Tom Tillis comes over, or somebody else, they can't afford to lose one vote, or Blanche's nomination is done. Now, the question is, how do we count? And is there one that is willing to go against Trump, a weakened President Trump now, and vote against Todd Blanche? And another thing, they're going to need more than one day. I know the Republicans and Senate Majority Leader Thune wants to try to minimize the risk and only have Todd Blanche there for 5 or 6 hours. It ain't going to be enough. And the Democrats better figure out a way procedurally to continue to expand that hearing, because you couldn't do one of these scandals, let alone more than a dozen that Todd Blanche is responsible for in one day.
You raise a great point, though, which is the most important thing for me is, well, I care about outcomes, obviously, right? And I want there to be good outcomes. But to get good outcomes, there has to be a good process. And I know process could be boring, and process could sound bureaucratic, and delegation of time and rules and all of these things, start to sound like, oh, come on, man, let's just do it. Let's just do it. But, that reality TV show, let's just do it. And, let's just see drama. I think that's one of the reasons that we kind of got here. There's a lot of other reasons as well. But there is this kind of instant gratification, this desire to abhor process and rules and doing that. Who does that? Why are you talking about that, man? Let's just wing it. Let's just wing it. Donald Trump just shows up in NATO and just wings it. Yeah, but that's very dangerous. Okay. And when we talk about the hearing of Todd Blanche, the most important thing for me is that every senator should be taking their responsibility seriously and should be spending, each senator, to me, should have about at least an hour to 90 minutes each to ask real serious questions of Todd Blanche. And to me, there should be a multiple day session, and it should be structured in a way that focuses on perhaps different themes of the conduct, whether it's ICE, Border Patrol, Gestapo, deporting people to CCOT, the conflicts of interest, Epstein, the other cases involving Trump suing the government, settling with Trump in the $10 billion case, the J6 fund. I could easily do personally a 3 to 4 day deposition of Todd Blanche, 7 hours each day, and I would still have a lot of questions that I'd probably need to ask him after 25 hours of cross-examination, which Popok, you and I as litigators have done with witnesses in big important cases. You've done that. And so to me, fundamentally what these MAGAs have done is they've destroyed process. And they've rigged the outcomes by killing the process, by shortening people's ability to, to ask questions and to investigate, so that the outcomes basically are predetermined. And that's one of the reasons that Donald Trump hates the court system, because the court system involves process and rules And if you violate rules, there are consequences. Jurors are selected independent. Those are all of the things that he hates. And, this vignette that I just want to share to me is kind of symptomatic of this Trump regime. You may have seen in South Carolina on July 4th, there was this event where these Apache helicopters flew no less than 10 to 15 feet above the ocean right there. And it went viral that these Apaches were flying so low, like it almost felt like the people in the beach water. If you were 7 feet tall, you were almost close to touching it. It was a very dangerous thing. The National Guard saw this and they suspended 8 of the crew members for doing this, and they disciplined them, and they were in the process of disciplining them. Then all of MAGA went crazy, like, nah, man, this is patriotism. This is America, everybody. This is what we do. We fly Apaches really low. And then this became some culture war issue where Pete Hegseth was like, don't worry, I got your back. And then carry on, patriots, we've got your back. And then they start posting this photo as though it is as though this is a rallying call. This is what America is all about. Now, let me be very clear. Do I think it's cool? Like, do I think it's cool that you have the way it looks and Apache helicopters flying low, and for someone who's never flown an Apache, do I think that's cool? Yeah, it looks cool. Okay. Like that, but look how close it is to the people. And the reason you don't fly that low is that there's a margin of error that increases the lower you fly like that. And let's just say something happened and all of those people down there were killed. Those pilots that were in there and the Apache crew, would be in jail for the rest of their lives. And people like Hegseth would be throwing them under the bus and saying, how do they do that? How do they do that? How do they do that? And now what we're applauding, is rule breaking. And we're up as a society. I know, we're not, but creating situations where error and dangerous things can continue to occur. When you gut and you get rid of members in the intelligence community, career people, when you get rid of top federal prosecutors, the career prosecutors at the DOJ, when you get rid of actual people at the FBI with experience and replace them with Kash Patels, put Bill Pulte as the director of national intelligence, when you I'm doing a video today on Trump throwing the CIA under the bus. When you remove intelligence officials, and I'm not suggesting that the CIA has this exalted history and everything they do is right and it's great, let's become CIA fanboys or whatever. But when you get rid of your intelligence community and people who are giving you assessments and you replace it with yourself winging it, the same kind of mentality that tells you, going back to the show, I'm just going to paint the reflecting pool blue and the algae will go away. The consequences there are embarrassing and humiliating algae-filled cesspool. Then with the fireworks, there's ash over. It gets more serious when you start to prosecute people criminally, to blame them, to scapegoat them. So it gets serious, not to suggest it's not a serious thing. But then when you apply that lack of science, it's not just cutting corners, Popok, as you said before, it's cutting facts. And when you push all of that aside, facts, intelligence, science, cut corners, and then you do that with national security, intelligence, and everything like that, you then have a dangerous dystopian fascist country where you have error, you have malice, and that's a very dangerous agreement, very dangerous things to see. So I want to talk about that when we get back. FBI Director Kash Patel. I want to talk about Lorenzo Araujo being murdered by ICE and Border Patrol. That's still happening on the streets. We'll talk about more. Let's take our last quick break of the show. A reminder, if you or somebody knows been injured in an auto accident, trucking accident, if you've been injured by the negligence of a company, or if you know somebody who has, Popok's firm deals with catastrophic injury cases. He represents a lot of people who watch and listen to Legal AF. So give a call. The consultation is free no matter where you are in the United States. 877-POPOK-AF or visit thepopokfirm.com. Call 877-POPOK-AF or visit thepopokfirm.com. Also, make sure you subscribe to Legal AF on YouTube and subscribe to Legal AF on Substack. We'll come back. Home stretch of Legal AF coming right up. Let's hear from our sponsors.
Running a business means you're always reachable until you're not. And the moment you miss that call, that text, that follow-up, a competitor is the one that picks it up. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the business phone system built so you never miss an opportunity. I like that Quo keeps all your calls, texts, and voicemails in one place so anyone on your team can see the full conversation history and respond quickly. And when you're unavailable, Quo's built-in AI agent can answer questions and even book appointments so you're not losing potential customers after hours. Money is on the line. Always say hello with Quo. Try Quo for free plus 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/legalaf. That's QUO.com/legalaf. Look, magnesium, it's something most of us lack. And if you're taking that drugstore variant, you're still not getting the full picture. Industrial farming, chronic stress, and everyday aging all make it worse. Most supplements only use one form of magnesium, but magnesium comes in many forms that support your body in different ways. That's why you need to try Qualia Magnesium Plus. It combines 10 bioavailable forms of magnesium with more than 70 trace minerals for comprehensive full-spectrum support. Sleep deeper, think sharper, recover faster, support muscle strength, a steadier mood, and balanced energy metabolism. It's not just a sleep supplement. Oh no, it's a full body magnesium system built for modern living so you can feel your best every day. Since adding Qualia Magnesium Plus to my routine, I'm feeling easier recovery from workouts and a calm, more centered wind down at night. It's been a supportive addition to my daily wellness routine. Experience the most trusted magnesium for purity, potency, and performance. Plus, it's non-GMO, vegan, and gluten-free, making it a choice you can feel good about. Go to qualialife.com/legalaf for 50% off. And here's a bonus. Use the code LEGALAF for an additional 15% off your order. That's QUALIA life.com/legalaf and then use code LEGALAF. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring this episode.
Welcome back to Legal AF. Thank you to all of our sponsors. They make the show possible. The sponsors support us. Support our sponsors if you can. Discount codes are in the description below. Michael Popok. The reporting from MS Now and others, and you can see it by the travel logs as well, was Kash Patel was getting ready to go to Chicago to see his girlfriend perform in the parking lot. And he was pulled back to the White House and he was told, "Where you going, man? Where you going?" And there's been a lot of stories about Kash Patel. And, it's an interesting one. He continues to embarrass a regime that's deeply an embarrassing regime from the outset. So there's already a humiliation ritual going place. He checks the corruption box that the Trump regime likes. He checks the incompetence box that the Trump regime likes. The only thing that may be working against him is that when he's flying around in the jets and with the girlfriend and doing all that stuff, that may make Trump a little bit kind of not jealous of it, but he's like, you got to be here suffering with me over here in the White House while I think Iran's trying to kill me, and so Popok, as my dogs are barking like crazy, what do you make of it all?
Well, Kash Patel has a habit. You said that Donald Trump was born with a golden foot in his mouth or whatever it is. Kash Patel also has a complete tin ear when it comes to things that he can say out loud, forgetting that he's no longer a right-wing podcaster, shilling products with cash, K-A, $H on them, but is supposed to be one of the leaders of our intelligence community and the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He's not supposed to be trying to get laid or trying to curry favor with his girlfriend or show, like you said, travel around the country instead of doing his job domestically and otherwise, and going to sporting events and purchasing, having a fleet of BMWs purchased for him. And using the company jet, which is the jets related to the administration for his personal use. And he's now lost the shoes that are dropping now include Chuck Grassley, who was one of his biggest defenders in the Senate, but now he's opened up an investigation demanding to know how Kash Patel is spending taxpayer dollars on trips, on travel, on sporting events, BMWs, planes, and the like. You know, when you take an administration plane, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour to fly, you know, and the response from Kash Patel's office is he's reimbursed it. I doubt he's reimbursed it to the liking of Grassley. And when you get personally grounded by the White House and by the people within the White House, and I can only think of a couple, Susie Wiles and Stephen Miller. When they say insiders within the White House have demanded his appearance at the White House, it's Susie Wiles and likely Stephen Miller. He's being called on the carpet here. And it didn't help that in response to reporting about him having a golden jet ski, his defense to that was that he posted on social media, "It's a gold-plated jet ski, you dumbass." That is, while the American people are suffering under the Trump economy and are trying to figure out how to make ends meet or to even have ends to meet, to have FBI directors say, "Come on, man, come on, bruh. It's gold-plated." Like this is back to the tin ear moment. And the question is, you know, when I was a kid, you probably played it too. It's a very analog game. It was a series of small plastic ice cubes that were in a rack, and you had a little baby mallet, a little hammer, and there was a thing on top, and you would have to knock one of those cubes down and hope the whole thing wouldn't collapse. And after a while, you'd be the one, or your friend would be the one to hit that last cube, and the entire ice flow would collapse, right? Because you're on thin ice. How many cubes have to fall under Kash Patel for him finally to get fired? Kristi Noem should have been the wake-up call for Kash Patel and her embarrassment that came to town. And she was doing very similar things, right? She was playing, according to reporting, she was playing footsie with Corey Lewandowski on Homeland Security Gulf Streams that were outfitted, including, you know, one compartment of it, which is supposed to be the private living quarters, was like a master bedroom that Corey and Kristi would disappear into. And the drumbeat of those stories, even before Kristi Noem's husband had some sort of weird fetish that ended up leading to divorce, Kash Patel has got the same problem. And using the FBI to go after members of the media who leak about him and his drinking, for instance, and public intoxication, or leak about his using the company dime, you know, our money, to support him squiring around with his girlfriend, and then going after the press and opening up investigations about it, has been a very, very bad look, even for the Trump administration. And I think the point you were making is that what's okay for Trump is not okay for people that are not named Donald Trump. There's things that sometimes there's this conflation. I've seen it in organizations where people who work for the top apex predator that runs the company suddenly believe they are the apex predator. And they find out very, very quickly that there's only one top dog and there's only one person. So I've been in organizations, which I will not name, where people have suddenly thought they are the Donald Trump of the organization and started acting and mimicking their spending or their attack on the media or the press or their social media posting. And that wears out your welcome pretty quickly, you know, even though we're 18, 19 months into this administration with somebody like Donald Trump and his ego. So him getting reined in, even Pam Bondi didn't get called on the carpet. I'll tell you who did. Tulsi Gabbard got called on the carpet last September about her, February 28th was the bombing. Iran was, yes, last September, after the bombs on the nuclear capacity of Iran, the first time, when she was busy talking about how bombing is a terrible thing and can lead to nuclear holocaust, she got called on the carpet, and Tulsi Gabbard is no longer with us. Kristi Noem got called to the White House after things went really awry with her testimony before the House and the Senate on back-to-back days about no-bid contracts for her $250 million ad campaign. Much of the money went to friends of hers, and she got fired. So the ones that get called into the White House normally have a very short half-life. If I were to guess, Kash Patel does not make it. We just passed 4th of July, does not make it to Labor Day. I'm not even sure he makes it. I want to hear your opinion on this. I'm not even sure he makes it in like through the month of July on that particular, because there's nothing he can do to fix it. Like being told to shut the fuck up, is one thing. And you know, some people were able to accomplish that. Like we hear a lot less from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's still doing terrible things to Americans' public health, but we hear about it less. You know, Mark Wayne Mullen, you know, other than his Senate appearances, House appearances, we're not seeing him out the way that Kristi Noem did. Do you think he's going to be able to survive like RFK Jr., or do you think he's going out the door like Tulsi Gabbard? And
no, he's going to survive because he's a man, and Trump fires women, and he can tolerate the corruption in the men. And I believe it's as simple as that. Kristi Noem, Bondi, Chavez DeRemer, right? The big high-profile firings. But don't get me wrong, they are very bad, awful people. Are they worse than Lutnick, Kash Patel, RFK, Bessent, Hegseth? Hey, I mean Hegseth. I mean, come on. You know, the reality is Bondi, frankly, makes Blanche. I mean, you know, Blanche makes Bondi look, you know, somewhat ethical, right? And it's a horrible thing to say because she was horrific. But Blanche is a severely worse version of Bondi in terms of corruption and incompetence, all kind of, you know, built into one. And so the reality is that, you know, Patel, the other reason too is Patel's seen the Epstein files. And you can arguably say that, you know, Bondi has also, and so will Bondi, you know, whatever. But I think that Trump fears that someone like a Patel will go out and say what he saw in the files, more than a Bondi. And I think he thinks he can control. So that's my overall view of that. And I'll give you a data point as well. You know, the White House, Stephen Chung and others have come out and said, nah, you know, I mean, I think Kash Patel posted something, you know, really kind of heinous and absurd, which what else is new, where he, in response to the MS Now article saying Kash Patel can't count on Trump's protection forever. And Kash Patel goes, nah, bruh, my jet ski is gold plated, dumbass. Your job is to lie. Mine's to protect the American people. And business is good. I mean, man, this is the FBI director saying that. But then the White House account, fake news at its finest. Nobody was frustrated. In fact, we'll start boosting and promoting his earlier tweet more. Congrats, MS Now. You all just played yourself, dumbasses. And again, this is the White House. This is the White House. This isn't Love Island.
It's not a frat house.
This isn't Frat House. This isn't Love Island. This isn't, you know, Apprentice meets Kardashian, you know, whatever. This is the why, you know, and again, you know, my dogs were barking earlier because my wife just got home with my mother-in-law and our little baby, you know, and I mean, this is, you know, this isn't me speaking as Democrat, independent, political guy. Like, come on, what are we doing here? And what I loved about the law, what I loved about practicing law, what I loved about being in courts and in depositions, you know, was I viewed it as an honorable profession. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of lawyers who don't behave honorably, but this is how I viewed it, where I could, you know, pursue truth and fight for things that I believe were justice and play by rules and fairly and ethically and morally. And those are the things that were more important. And so when I see, Kash Patel go in, dumbass, my FBI director, my jet ski is gold plated, bro. What are you doing? What is that? Why is it the FBI director? And then the White House goes, yeah, dumbasses, we're going to retweet that shit more. I'm like, okay. Come on, and then you wonder why we get involved into catastrophic wars. There's other reasons too. And then have no plan and lose, and then they're negotiating. This negotiation will keep bombing, but they desperately want a deal.
I want to ask you something, Ben, on that note. When our adversaries, who keep an eye on our intelligence community,
they don't need to. They see the unintelligence right there. That's my plan.
How do you think Putin is read in on this by his people about weekly reports about Kash Patel? When his presidential briefing book comes in, do you think they reproduce all of Rapid Response 47 and all the bras and gold bladed and dumbasses?
Yeah, and I think it is that, but then it's also, here's what we know. We know that this individual is a malignant narcissist who's literal. I mean, the Iranian negotiating team diagnosed Donald Trump as being clinically mentally ill, and that they're negotiating with actually somebody who should be in a who should be institutionalized under a 5150 hold. Like, that's how they viewed it. So it's, how do you deal with somebody, like that, and how do you address? So the question then really becomes is, how do you deal with it and how do you address it? And I do think that there is a lot of criticism that should be directed at Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, because every time I watch him and he does the over the top praise of Donald Trump, when like Donald Trump's like, I hate NATO. And they'll be like, hey, Rutte, he just says he hated NATO. Oh, but he loves it. He says hate, but he means love. And he does it in this like over the top way that almost appears, you're watching, some like a parody movie, I'm trying to think of any movie that, like Austin Powers or something, or Borat, but I think I think it's a version of what Putin does, and it's a version of how they've diagnosed him. And then, when Mark Rutte goes, Donald, everybody loves you. Can I show you the chart that I made for you, Donald? Here in NATO, we call it the Trump trillions, because trillions of dollars, and we love you. And then Donald Trump would be like, I like this guy. You know who I don't like? I don't like Spain. I don't like Spain. They're mean to me. You see how Mark Rutte deals with it. And I bet you behind the scenes, Mark Rutte's, the guy's a psycho. The guy's a psychopath. But look, all I need to do is go to him. You're brilliant, Donald. And look what happened in NATO. Say what you want. And I don't like Mark Rutte, but Zelensky got the Patriot interceptor license that he needed in order to defend Kyiv. So I'm sure if you privately ask Mark Rutte, why do you behave like that, dude? And by the way, there was that question from that Denmark reporter, who said, when you sit up there and Trump's threatening to invade Denmark and you're saying that helps the NATO alliance, like, do you have no self-respect? And Mark Rutte is like, I think we've never been stronger coming out of this. I bet you Mark Rutte, at least behind the scenes, says, look, we've diagnosed him as this. This is what we're learning. You have to say this. It's terrible that this is the way it is. The United States, whether you like it or not, still has the largest military, this, that, and the other. And so we have to, in order to get the interceptor license to Zelensky, I have to go and be, so Popok, the short of it is that shouldn't be the way people behave. But I think that everybody has to, but my own view of it personally, if you want to know my own view, I think you just have to be, I think when you do that, Trump sees that as weakness. So he keeps on testing you over and over and over and over and over and over. And I think the only way to do it, and one of the reasons that this has dragged on so long is I think right away Trump does it. Then get the hell out of NATO. Then get the hell out. We don't want you. See you later. Bye. Goodbye. We don't want you. F you. Okay, you want to do that? Sue me. I'll sue you. You sue me. I'll take your deposition. I think that's the better approach.
Well, and on your social media point, I'm not sure Rapid Response 47 and anything that Natalia Harp posts, the human printer, matters to whether Susie Wiles and Stephen Miller want to axe FBI Director Kash Patel and replace him with somebody who will lower the volume about all the things the FBI is doing without all the grandstanding and personal self-dealing that is on full display with Kash Patel. Because, there was reporting, you and I did it a few weeks ago, that they interviewed, or they got a quote from Harp about all her, if everybody thinks, when you and I report on 271 or whatever it is, social media posts by Donald Trump in a 24-hour period, and the meltdowns, most of those are not Donald Trump. Most of those are an insomniac named Natalie Harp, who writes all this stuff for Donald Trump. She has complete control and keys over all of his social media and his Truth Social account. And she's admitted that she does not clear any of what she writes with Susie Wiles or anybody in the White House. She says she works for one person. His name is Donald Trump. So Trump is usually out in front of his own enablers, his own handlers. And so if Harp isn't under the control or regulation of the White House, Rapid Response 47 certainly is not either. So I would take that with a grain of salt if I were Kash Patel, whatever Stephen Chung had Rapid Response 47 say today. But I don't disagree with you that it does appear that the unsinkable people in the administration seem to be the men, especially men who Donald Trump is in business with, like Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent, literally in business with, and not the women who are as incompetent as the men, or maybe more so. But they're the ones that seem to get fired first. There's others that could go, but as you and I have said, if Pete Hegseth should have been long gone, RFK Jr. should be long gone. We should be talking about a whole nother group of cabinet members. But yet we're not. And Kash Patel seems to have this ability like a cockroach to survive. But, you and I will be the first ones to say we were wrong and Kash Patel was fired today.
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example, too. I mean, Kristi Noem, right after the murders of multiple people, would come out and have you even heard Mark Wayne Mullen come out and address Lorenzo Salgado Arrojo's cold-blooded murder? And it's look, Mark Wayne Mullen's behavior in enabling what took place in Houston, can you say it is any degree not as bad as Kristi Noem? It's just, to me, it's like, no, there is a level of, well, she's a woman and da-da-da-da-da, and she's horrible and she deserved to leave and was the worst person ever. But so is he, It's his ICE Border Patrol Gestapo. It's his ICE Gestapo who killed in cold blood, who then covered it up, and who did the exact same things we saw in Minnesota. And they tried to, blame Lorenzo Salgado Arrojo for his death. Then when there were people in the van with Lorenzo Arrojo who said, no, you killed him in cold blood, they then tried to deport the witnesses, including his brother and the workers. We then learn about Lorenzo Salgado Arrojo, that he's been in the country for 35 years. He has 3 children who are American citizens. He's a model person in the United States, although he wasn't fully lawfully here yet at this point, although he was always working towards that. He ran a business. He employed people, paid taxes, he ran a construction company. He was working that day. The Trump regime officials said that they were hunting Guatemalans, like as though that makes it better. They were hunting Guatemalans who they said were criminals. And then they saw a brown guy and they said, oh, well, he must be Guatemalan and he's Mexican. Not that, the terrific racial profiling from the outset with all of this. And then they ram him. They pull him out and they kill him. He bleeds out on the street. They take away his personal belongings. They then engage in a massive cover up. They bring him, they take away his personal belongings so the family can't even find his body. They don't even release the family to the body right away. And fortunately, the family got good legal support, LULAC, other groups, the community rally, good investigative journalism, figured out what was happening or some of what was happening. And the Trump regime, had people out today, this morning, with their talking points. Yeah, but we need to focus more on the criminal illegal immigrants. I wish people would care more about the holding the criminals accountable versus, things like this. And it's like, there were lots of MAGAs out there who were saying this. And then, I'll leave with this, with this one, Popok, if you want to add anything, but we're hitting that moment on the show, which is there was also the same way Donald Trump wouldn't sign the housing affordability bill. Fortunately, it passed on its own because the deadline expired for him to veto it. But he said, I'm protesting it, right? A bipartisan housing affordability bill. He was the one who killed the bipartisan immigration bill, which would have had strong borders. It would have expedited asylum claims to make sure that there was a judicial process quickly. Habeas corpus would be given, a compassionate view towards immigrants, criminals, of course, deported right away, strengthening the borders, paying Border Patrol more, actually solving the problem. Bipartisan, the same way, the housing bill had kind of far right wing, left wing joining. Bipartisan immigration bill, left wing, right wing. Biden did it. Trump said, kill it. Let's cause the problems. And then let's make this all one big game while the American people suffer. And then we'll go hunting and we'll go torturing and terrorizing because that's our way of, implementing our fascist Project 2025 agenda. And for me, I say bipartisan, that was a solution to a difficult problem. And whether it's the memorandum of understanding with Iran, whether it's a housing affordability, whether it's the JCPOA, whether it is a bipartisan immigration, whether it's his businesses, the guy is a destroyer, Trump. He rips, he shreds, he doesn't build, he doesn't do deals. He's not a deal maker. Deal makers don't go, I do deals, deal. You know who say that? Frauds say that. Deal makers don't go around saying I'm deal. Strong people don't go, you see how strong I am? I'm a strong guy. I'm strong, everybody. That's not the way people behave who are actually competent in doing the thing. So I leave with that. Popok, anything you want to say before we go?
No, absolutely. I think we've done a good wrap at the intersection of law and politics today. Appreciate everybody. Appreciate so much my friendship with you, my friend. And
you do. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time on Legal AF. Remember, if you or someone you know has been injured in a car accident, auto accident, trucking accident, any type of negligence caused by somebody else, a company that caused an injury, catastrophic injuries, don't be shy. Call Popok, 877-POPOK-AF, or visit thepopokfirm.com. Consultation is free. Reach out, see if you have a case. Also, make sure you subscribe on YouTube to Legal AF and Substack to Legal AF. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time on Legal AF. Have a great one, everybody. Shout out Midas Mighty.